This will sound very strange, but on the 22nd anniversary of 9/11, in a Monday night football game on 9/11 in 2023, future Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers was hit and injured in his first drive as a New York Jet. And this is an extremely important prophetic sign that is pointing to the jets that hit the Twin Towers in New York. This amazing and deep story that God is telling is, among other things, a summary of the GOAT of football, greatest of all time, Tom Brady's prophetic career, player number 12, who began his career 12 days after 9/11 in 2001, when a New York Jets linebacker hit hard the New England Patriots quarterback, which resulted in Tom Brady playing his first NFL game. Tom Brady, player number 12 for New England, played his first game because of a hard hit by a New York Jets linebacker, and that was 12 days after 9/11 when Jets from New England hit hard the towers in New York. This Aaron Rodgers New York Jets prophecy from God that is predicting that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan in New York City on December 2nd, 2023. And there will be a massive evacuation of Manhattan Island. It is also likely that the official narrative in the mainstream media that will emerge regarding this event will somehow be a lie. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction was made ahead of time, as does this timestamped email and forensic notes PDF. If you are skeptical, please email me and I will forward these to you. Although it has been known since early 2021 that a dirty bomb would explode in Manhattan in the near future, as you can see in this email, this prediction for a dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan on December 2nd was known since at least September 29th. There are also many other videos on this channel that make this prediction that were posted many days before this video was posted. All right, we're going to talk about this extremely important football game. This Monday night football game, the one game that's played on the Monday. If you're not familiar with football, it's the nationally televised football game. And this year, the first Monday night football game of the season in week 1 happened to occur on the date 9/11. And I will explain how very important this prophetic football game is, and how it is a 9/11 sign. And so I'm just going to go through notes. It isn't a scripted video. I will do my best to relay to you all of the understanding and knowledge that I have regarding this. The reason why it isn't scripted is, one reason is that it would just take way too long to write out a script, and there is so much other information and videos that need to be produced at this point. Time is late. There are many things that God is communicating through his big picture of signs. This very important video explains part of God's big picture of prophetic signs, patterns, and connections, and an important story God told that pointed to September 25th, 2023, regarding the prediction for an explosion of a dirty bomb or suitcase nuke in Manhattan, New York City, and mass evacuation from Manhattan Island on December 2nd, 2023. September 25th ended up being the penultimate step in the trail of signs leading to December 2nd. For a full explanation of the very important prophetic signs that occurred on September 25th, including the 67th Annual International Atomic Energy Agency Conference that revealed adding 67 days to September 25th to reach December 2nd, the predicted date for the dirty bomb or suitcase nuke explosion in Manhattan. Watch the amazing video titled Bomb in New York City on 12/2, December 2nd, equals 343 firefighters lost on 9/11 prophecy. But let's begin with the fact that if you are not familiar, God uses sports in his big picture of science. In fact, sports signs are very, very important. And if you think about it, it is an easy way for God to communicate a lot of information. We have players' names, we have numbers, many instances of prophetic numbers, which is how God communicates in his big picture of signs. We have symbolism from cities, team names, and on and on. There's so many ways God can communicate through a prophetic sports game. Furthermore, another reason why God uses sports, especially the NFL, is because America pays attention to the NFL. And furthermore, God created the NFL and football. All right. And so let's begin. This 9/11 2023 football game is so very, very important. The big thing about it, which is national news. In fact, it's on the very top of the Drudge Report page, for example. This is to indicate as an example of how important this is as a national news story. It transcends just sports. It's not just a sports world story. The big story is how quarterback Aaron Rodgers, after playing for many years for the Green Bay Packers, changed teams this offseason to the New York Jets. And it's a very big story. Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And were it not for... let's leave it at that. But in fact, this sign does point to Tom Brady, the GOAT. Aaron Rodgers arguably could have been a GOAT, but there was also Tom Brady. But anyway, there are many other great quarterbacks in history. Tom Brady is the GOAT, though. The GOAT stands for greatest of all time, which hints at a goat, which is Antichrist symbolism in the Bible, a goat, as in the sheeps and the goats. So Aaron Rodgers, the big dramatic, and I do mean drama. The big drama here was his change to the New York Jets. And in the first series, I think before he hadn't even thrown a completed pass. In the first series, in other words, what I mean by series, they get onto the field and the Jets attempt to, make a score. And the first series is like before the first down. So no, not before the first down, but the first drive. The first drive. Anyway, Aaron Rodgers, I'm pretty sure hadn't even made a complete pass. I think he had thrown a pass, attempted pass, but it was incomplete. So, in other words, the very symbolic beginning of the game, which added to the drama. Oh, yes. And speaking of drama, the HBO series Hard Knocks follows every year a football team in the NFL. And this year they chose to follow the New York Jets. So the cameras are inside the locker rooms. They're following the New York Jets in the preseason and the practices, and it's a big drama. And I'm sure, of course, HBO chose to follow the Jets this year because of Aaron Rodgers. So that just adds to the drama. And if I forget to mention, Hard Knocks, the name itself is part of this prophetic sign, the name of the show, Hard Knocks, because this is ultimately pointing to the hard knocks of the two twin towers on 9/11, as I will explain. Now, Aaron Rodgers was wearing jersey number 8, which was a surprise because I hadn't thought about it until today. Why is Aaron Rodgers wearing number 8 when he, through his entire career, which has been a long one, has been wearing number 12? That's because of Joe Namath. The jersey number 12 is retired. It's not possible to wear jersey number 12. And so Aaron Rodgers could not wear jersey number 12 while playing for the Jets. And speaking of this, Now it is finally known, after years of after years of thinking about and contemplating, why is it that Aaron Rodgers wears jersey number 12? Because also Tom Brady wore jersey number 12. And I always knew for years now that there was some very big, important significance to the fact that Aaron Rodgers wears number 12. But it only has now come to light after all of these years why, prophetically, Aaron Rodgers wears or wore jersey number 12. It was to point to Joe Namath. And that's also why, incidentally, why Tom Brady wore jersey number 12. And so here we get at, let's begin to get at the big thing. Well, let me just say, first of all, that the final score for the Jets in the game was 22 points. And that is confirmation that this is a 9/11 sign, because this occurred on the 22nd anniversary of the 9/11 events. And the New York Jets, as in the jets that flew into the towers in New York, two of them that struck two towers, scored 22 points, which is 2 twos, on the 22nd anniversary of two planes striking two towers. Okay? So that in itself is confirmation that what we are talking about is a 9/11 sign here. But what is the deeper significance other than it just simply being a 9/11 sign? Because when we really understand God's signs, and not just superficially, like is explained elsewhere, there is deeper meaning. There's more to this, and I'm going to explain what it is. But what happened after 9/11, 12 days after 9/11 in 2001, was the beginning, the big, dramatic beginning of the GOAT's career, player number 12, Tom Brady. This is in fact a Tom Brady sign. This Aaron Rodgers. So Aaron Rodgers, if I didn't finish explaining, he got injured, and currently today, which is the day after, it's Tuesday now, the news is that he has to go for an MRI and they'll determine what exactly happened, but it doesn't look good. Anyway, so it looks like his season could be finished, possibly even his career, which would be quite symbolically fitting. In fact, if I were to bet, I would say that it is the end of his career because it points back to the symbolic beginning of Tom Brady's career, the other player, number 12. In fact, come to think of it, I would be highly surprised if it isn't the end of Aaron Rodgers' career, for that fact alone. The symbolic ending of Aaron Rodgers' career, player number 12, is pointing to the symbolic beginning of Tom Brady's career, which began with an injury. And it was against the New York Jets. That's right. The beginning of Tom Brady's career, player number 12, 12 days after 9/11, began with the Jets. And how did it begin? With a hit, as in a hard knock, from New York Jets player number 57. And 57, which is the linebacker's number, because in football, the player's number is associated with their position. And a linebacker is going to wear something like 57. And this linebacker, 57, his hit on the New England Patriots quarterback was the thing that changed history. And I mean that literally. And I'll explain. But 57 hints at 12 also. So 12 days after 9/11, Tom Brady, number 12, got his first appearance in a football game. And it was because of the hit by player number 57, which hints at 12, 5 plus 7. Now, what happened? Mo Lewis, New York Jets player number 57, hit hard the New England Patriots star quarterback, Drew Bledsoe, who had actually taken the Patriots to a Super Bowl in the late 90s. And Tom Brady was never supposed to be a starting quarterback. In fact, he almost didn't even make the draft. He was drafted player number 199, and if I remember correctly, it was the second last position to be drafted. He almost didn't make the draft, but he was drafted at the last moment by the New England Patriots. And that was the beginning of history there. But he was drafted 199th. And he was never supposed to be a starting quarterback, but for this dramatic hit by Mo Lewis, which almost killed Drew Bledsoe. It was later realized after the game that he had internal bleeding, hence Drew bled. So bled is even past tense. It was determined after that he almost bled to death internally from the hit. So Drew Bledsoe ran the ball to the sidelines, but he made a fatal error. He, in attempting to get the first down, continued to run and didn't run out of bounds, which is what a quarterback should do to avoid something like this, an injury. And thus, Mo Lewis had to hit and knock him out of bounds and to end the play. And that hit was so hard, it was like he slammed it at a tower. Mo Lewis just basically shoulder hit him as if Drew Bledsoe was running into a twin tower. This was right after 9/11. In fact, right at the beginning of the game, there was a tribute to the New York Police Department and firefighters, and the game was in New York. All right, and it was Boston. It was the New England Patriots, and the two flights on 9/11 were flights from Boston that slammed into the towers. They were jets that slammed into the towers. That's why this game against the Jets with Boston, New England. Furthermore, New England symbolizes America and the spiritual founding of America, and New England, the New England Patriots have been the most important sports team in God's prophetic signs, and sports signs are very important. And Tom Brady is the pinnacle of the New England Patriots sports signs. In fact, the New England sports signs have really been all about Tom Brady, and what I'm explaining is the reason why. The symbolic beginning of Tom Brady's career, player number 12, which was 12 days after 9/11. Now, Drew Bledsoe wore jersey number 11. And 11 hints at the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11. The first flight that hit the North Tower was Flight 11 that had a crew of 11 people, and it was in the 11th state to join the Union. And New York City is made up of 11 letters, and on, in fact. In fact, the second plane had 56 passengers and a crew of 9. The first plane had 11 crew and 81 passengers, and 81 hints at 8 plus 1 equals 9. And so that's a pairing of 9 and 11. And likewise, in the second plane, the crew was 9 and 56 passengers, hints at 5 plus 6 equals 11. That's another pairing of 9 and 11. Furthermore, on 9/11, the Dow Jones was closed at 9,605, which gives another 6 plus a 9 plus, and then the 6 plus 5 equals 11. Well, anyway, it was player number 11 that hit the quarterback, the Jets quarterback on 9/11 in 2023, Aaron Rodgers. And that, of course, hinted at the plane with the 56 passengers, which hints at 11. Because it's a 9/11 sign because 56, because that's the number he's going to wear. Because that's, like, again, it's associated with positions. He can't wear number 11, this position. So God used 56 to hint at it because 5 plus 6 equals 11. And the Twin Towers looked like a giant 11 and in the 11th state, and they were hit by Flight 11. So it was player 56 that took out Aaron Rodgers and caused the injury. Okay. Now, the reason why it was Drew Bledsoe that wore jersey number 11 and was replaced by Tom Brady, player number 12, and this is the big thing, is that it is a hint at the 11th hour going into the 12th hour. The reason for the number 11s in the 9/11 signs, one reason is that it hints at the 11th hour, a phrase that Jesus coined, the 11th hour. In English is an idiom that means last chance. Time is running out. As in last chance for the nation to repent and turn back to God, which was what the 9/11 judgment warning sign was, which is why it was the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11, for example. It was an 11th hour sign, and player 11 being replaced by player number 12, 12 days after 9/11, is an 11th hour going into the 12th hour sign. That's because when Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, and why it's an idiom is because in ancient Israel, the 11th hour referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness. That's the reason for the 11th hour idiom. All right, so that's why Aaron Rodgers, number 12. Now, it's also why he played for the Jets and why he was injured in the first game on 9/11 when the Jets scored 22 points 22 years after 9/11. But there's more to this because the first ever game of the GOAT. And I can't emphasize enough how important and prophetic Tom Brady's career has been. Like I'm saying, sports signs are very important, but by far the most important sports team has been the New England Patriots, and that is because of Tom Brady, and it is because of what I am explaining here and how it all points to 9/11, and furthermore, the flights from Boston on 9/11 that flew into New York, the jets that flew into the towers. Now, Tom Brady, Tom Brady played his first 2 games. Now, he replaced Drew Bledsoe with the Jets game on September 23rd, 2001, 12 days after 9/11. Player number 12 came into the game and began his career. And then he went on to win the Super Bowl, by the way. And Drew Bledsoe finally came back in the playoffs after Tom Brady got injured in the AFC Championship game. Tom Brady led the team. I'm jumping ahead, actually. I'm jumping ahead. Yes, I am jumping ahead. So let's go back. So the second game that he played, which was his first starting game, was against the Indianapolis Colts, against another prophetic quarterback that God has used, but again, because of Tom Brady. The contrast with Tom Brady, which was Peyton Manning and him being the quarterback for the Colts. But anyway, the first 2 games that Tom Brady played were against the New York Jets and the Colts. And that game, by the way, the second game, they scored 44 points, which hints at the Antichrist, the 44th president, the GOAT Antichrist, I should say. Now, the reason why Tom Brady began his career against the Jets and the Colts is because arguably the most famous quarterback in history, Joe Namath, who played for the Jets and was player number 12, just like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. This player, Joe Namath, became known as Broadway Joe. He was not just famous for winning the Super Bowl, and I'll explain that. Well, I'll explain it now. So he won the Super Bowl, and they were the extreme underdog, the New York Jets. Furthermore, the AFC at that time, in the beginning of the NFL history, was traditionally the underdog because the NFC was had been better in general, had more talent. But anyway, Joe Namath famously predicted to the media that he was going to win. He boldly, arrogantly said, I'm going to win this. I guarantee you I'm going to win the Super Bowl. And then he did. But they were the huge underdog. So for him to be saying that was, at the time, it was considered to be quite arrogant and bold. So that's part of the famous story of Joe Namath. But also then he went on to become Broadway Joe. He even actually was on Broadway in some Broadway show, I forget. But he was also known for his many TV appearances, and I think he may have been in some movies too, I forget. But he was he was famous for his acting after that. Okay, and he was famous also for being his fashion. He would wear fur coats on the sidelines of football games. Okay, so he was an attention getter. He stood out. Famous Joe Namath. All right. Now, Joe Namath in that Super Bowl, he's famous for winning in 1969. It was the let's see, it was I forget which Super Bowl. Super Bowl III, I think. Yes, Super Bowl III. And Oh, that's why the three's in the sign. The sign, I'll explain in a minute, but there's some threes in this football game on 9/11 and 2023. In fact, it was player number 3 that intercepted the ball 3 times from the Bills quarterback number 17, and 3 sets of 3 17s. So player number 3 for the Jets, this is another confirmation that points to Joe Namath in Super Bowl III. So player number 3 for the Jets intercepted the ball an astounding 3 times in the game, if you don't know football. If that's an astounding achievement. And that was from quarterback number 17 for the Bills. And both of these teams, by the way, are from the 11th state. That's more confirmation that this is a 9/11 sign, because the towers that looked like a giant 11 fell in the 11th state in New York City, which is made up of 11 letters, and by flight number 11. So anyway, in this Monday Night Football game in 2023, it was the 2 football teams from the 11th state, the New York Jets and the Buffalo Bills. Anyway, it was Buffalo Bills quarterback number 17 that threw the ball, and it was intercepted 3 times by player number 3 because of Super Bowl III. But 3 times 17, 3 interceptions for player number 17, is 51. And that's one of the confirmations that this is pointing to the date, which is also 9/11 symbolism, 11/19, the date 11/19, that Barack Obama, the Antichrist, will become the 51st vice president. Okay? So what I was saying a minute ago is that that Super Bowl III, was between the Colts and the Jets. And that's why Tom Brady began his career, player number 12, between the Colts and the Jets. Again, he came in and replaced Drew Bledsoe in the first game against the Jets, and then his first start ever, and God uses firsts for his signs, in his signs in general, was against the Colts. And that Super Bowl with Joe Namath was against the Colts. And Joe Namath played for the Jets. Now, here's another thing. The last Super Bowl that Tom Brady won for the New England Patriots was exactly 50 years later, Super Bowl 53. 50 years is extremely prophetic in God's signs. It comes from Leviticus chapter 25 and the 50-year Jubilee, where things, as the Jubilee says, return back to their original state. And that's why it was a full circle. Joe Namath was in attendance at the game. He was wearing a fur coat also, but he was part of the news story, the 50th anniversary of the famous upset victory of the Jets in Super Bowl III. Very famous Super Bowl. And that's why it was celebrated on the 50th anniversary at Super Bowl 53, which happened to be the last game for Tom Brady to win the Super Bowl for the Patriots. Going into that game, Tom Brady and also the coach, Bill Belichick, had been in 9 of the 11 Super Bowls that the Patriots had been in. It was the record 9th Super Bowl. In fact, it was a record. God uses records as well, and that was the record. 9 Super Bowls for it. No other team has been in the Super Bowl 9 times. And the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. As from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. So it was a record 9 Super Bowls, but it was also 9 out of 11 Super Bowls. But the reason for that, and also Tom Brady went into the Super Bowl with a record 17 Super Bowl records. So Tom Brady had 17 Super Bowl records. That Super Bowl in 2019 was 17 years after the first Super Bowl that Tom Brady won, which was the year that he took over after Drew Bledsoe was hit hard, which was symbolic of 9/11. And that Super Bowl in 2002 was just months after 9/11. It was the first Super Bowl win for the New England Patriots, in fact. The prior 2 Super Bowls they had been in, they lost. And the entire country just about was supportive of the New England Patriots because this was right after 9/11 and the symbolism involved with Patriots, the name. And also they were the underdog from what I recall. Now, that Super Bowl is famous. It's all about the final winning drive, which Tom Brady later became famous for, his winning late in the game winning drives. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, in fact. It can only be from God. Tom Brady has had all of these famous last-minute winning drives, like dramatic ones. It's stunning. It's because it's all about God designing it that way, in fact, to point back to the Super Bowl after 9/11, which was all about the winning drive, which in turn points to 9/11. Okay? Now that winning drive was with the score at 17-17. There was less than 2 minutes to play, just over a minute to play, in fact, if I recall. And famous sportscaster John Madden famously said he disagreed with the New England Patriots' call to try to attempt to get a field goal before the time ran out. He thought it would be better, more prudent to play it safe and go into overtime. But Tom Brady and the Patriots let it all hang out, and they went for it. And John Madden then famously said, "You know what? I'm starting to like their decision," as the drive unfolded, this last-minute winning drive. But the last-minute winning drive began at the 17-yard line, the Patriots' 17-yard line, with the score at 17-17. Okay? And then they got it downfield, and with time expiring, they kicked a field goal and won the game. A famous, dramatic ending, and the famous beginning of Tom Brady's career of Super Bowl victories. But that game was all about the last-minute drive, the last-minute winning drive that began on the 17-yard line of the Patriots with a score at 17-17, because it hinted at the 17 minutes in between when the two planes that were from Boston, New England, struck the two towers on 9/11. After the first plane struck the first tower, 17 minutes later, the second plane struck the second tower. In fact, that is the big sign, because in the Bible it says that a second witness is required to confirm a matter. And as after the first plane struck the North Tower, the world watched live and in confusion as to whether it was an act of terrorism or an accident or what. In fact, some people didn't even know it was a plane. They thought it was a bombing or something exploded or something. But 17 minutes later, as the world watched live and with horror, the second plane struck the second tower, which confirmed that it was an act of terrorism, and therefore confirmed that it was an act of God raising up the enemies of America temporarily, removing the divine protection that America has had since its beginning. And it all points to Deuteronomy 28 and God's promises of blessings and curses, which the number 11 symbolizes, which is why it was Flight 11 that flew into the towers. It looked like a giant 11. And so anyway, that was the 17 minutes, the second witness to, and so it pointed to Isaiah chapter 9, verses 10 through 11, which was part of the daily Bible reading in all standard daily Bibles, Bibles that are divided into 365 readings, one reading per year. 9/11 just happens to include Isaiah 9 through 10 through 11, which is regarding the judgment warning on ancient Israel of the Assyrians' raid, the temporary raid, and that the terrorists on 9/11 came from the same part of the world, and on and on. There's all of these parallels, right? Which Jonathan Cahn explains, including one of them, which is that the planes came from Governor's Island, where Logan Airport is, where the governor of the Boston, Massachusetts Bay Colony lived, John Winthrop, the first governor of Massachusetts. And he's famous for his 11 ships flotilla. And before they disembarked, this is the Pilgrims I'm talking about, the spiritual founding of America. There have only been two nations in the history of the world that have been founded on a relationship with God, Israel and America. And the pilgrims saw their crossing of the Atlantic as a parallel with the Israelites' crossing of the Jordan River into the Promised Land. And right before they crossed into the Promised Land, Moses gave them the word from God about the promises of blessings and curses. If they were to follow God and his commandments, they would be blessed. And if they were to depart from God and disobey God, then they would be cursed. And that's why the 11 flotilla ships, but it all points to John Winthrop, because the planes flew from Governor's Island, where John Winthrop lived and prayed to God, and then flew into the towers that looked like a giant 11. It hinted at John Winthrop's ships, the 11-ship flotilla that began America. The Mayflower, when they crossed the Atlantic, arrived with 101 passengers, which was also a hint at the number 11. And so this is also why the 11th hour into the 12th hour sign, with Drew Bledsoe, player number 11, replaced by Tom Brady, number 12. And then later in 2001, we had Flight 587 that crashed into Queens, New York City on the date 11/12, which was another 11th hour going into the 12th hour sign, incidentally. And coincidentally, on that same day, the New Jersey Pick 3 Lotto, for the first time ever, held 2 lottos in the same day. And the first lotto numbers were 587, and the second one was 578, which hinted at Flight 587 that crashed on that day. And on the first anniversary of 9/11, the Pick 3 New York Lotto numbers were 9/11, and on and on. So now, returning back to the Joe Namath and Tom Brady connection here, we have the 2002 Super Bowl, which was right after 9/11, and it was all about the number 17, because again, it was about the winning drive from the 17-yard line with the score at 17-17, which hinted at the 17 minutes in between the two planes that struck the two towers a couple of months earlier that came from New England. But then 17 years later, after the game that was all about the number 17, we had Tom Brady go into the Super Bowl with 17 Super Bowl records, and in 9 out of the 11 Super Bowls that the Patriots had been in. And that was the last Super Bowl that Tom Brady won for the Patriots. And that's why. But that was also the 50th anniversary of Super Bowl III, which was with Joe Namath. Now, the last Super Bowl that Tom Brady won for the Patriots in 2019 was against the Los Angeles Rams, and it was 17 years after the first Super Bowl win for Tom Brady and the Patriots, which was also against the Rams. And the two flights on 9/11 were from New England to Los Angeles. And the reason for the 17 minutes in between the two planes, and also the 17 years in between these two Super Bowls, is it also points to the 17 years in between the two space shuttle disasters. And the reason for that is because it all points to the NASA mission of Apollo 17, which was the last mission of Americans to the moon. And the moon symbolizes Christ. It is a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock symbolizes Christ. And the sun symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And the last American to depart from the moon is symbolic of America's departure from Christ. And this is what God is pointing to through all of this 17 intervals, the 17 minutes, 17 years, in between the two space shuttle disasters, and the space shuttle disasters were almost on the exact same calendar date, and they were commemorated on the same date every year because of that. And so it was literally a 17 years in between the two space shuttle disasters. But this is also why the 17 years in between the two Tom Brady Super Bowls, between the Rams. It's all pointing to Apollo 17 and America's departure from Christ. And the last American on the moon was exactly 144 weeks after the first state legalized abortion, the state that the Antichrist Obama is from, Hawaii. Now, the big connection here is that Super Bowl 53 there were only 2 Super Bowls in history where the winning team won with only scoring 1 touchdown. And that was Super Bowl III and Super Bowl 53. which completely cements. So Super Bowl 53 was the lowest. God uses records in his signs. This was the lowest scoring Super Bowl in history. The score was 13-3. And on the date 3/13, just after that, was the lowest record barometric pressure in a bomb cyclone. Just another side note. The record that pointed back to the record scoring Super Bowl, lowest scoring Super Bowl. Anyway, that Super Bowl was only won with one touchdown when the Patriots beat what team? The team from Los Angeles, the Rams. What team did they beat in the first Super Bowl in 2002? Tom Brady and the Patriots? They beat the Rams. That's because the two flights, these two Super Bowls between the Rams and the Patriots, and the second one being with the Los Angeles Rams, that's because the two flights on 9/11 were from Boston to Los Angeles that then flew into the Twin Towers in New York. That was another thing. And by the way, the World Series just before that 2019 Super Bowl between Los Angeles and Boston was the World Series between Boston and Los Angeles, which made it two championships between Boston and Los Angeles, which hinted at the two planes that were from flights from Boston to Los Angeles that flew into the Twin Towers on 9/11. And on the day of Game 1 of that World Series, the vintage World War II plane crashed onto Highway 101, which was another hint at the number 11. And the plane crashes that flew into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11. Well, anyway, back to that Super Bowl. They only scored one touchdown. It was the record lowest, and God uses records, and it was the record lowest scoring Super Bowl. But the other Super Bowl in which the team won while only scoring one touchdown was Super Bowl III. And Joe Namath was in attendance at that game. It was the 50th anniversary of that Super Bowl. So both of these Super Bowls, 50 years apart, were the only Super Bowls where the winning team scored one touchdown. And the winning touchdown for the Patriots, when did it come? It came near the end of the game. Finally, a touchdown was scored because the game went on and on and on without either team scoring a touchdown. Finally, the winning touchdown was scored at exactly 7 minutes remaining in the game. The touchdown was 7 points with the extra point, which made it a prophetic 3 sets of 7. And that's very significant because when the Israelites crossed into the Promised Land, they took the Promised Land, possession of it, after a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of Jericho, the security walls of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment, which hints at the coming collapse of America's security walls after the warning, 22 years after the warning on 9/11, when the walls of security were temporarily removed. The Israelites marched around the walls of Jericho 7 times, once per day, and then on the 7th day they marched 7 times, and while blowing 7 trumpets, 3 sets of 7. And that's why we have the Joe Namath touchdown 50 years later, the Patriots touchdown, 2 sevens, and then it was scored at 7 minutes remaining in the game, 3 sets of 7. All right, now I've explained a big chunk of this now. This game, again, this Monday Night Football game in 2023 was for the purpose of pointing back to Joe Namath, because again, Aaron Rodgers plays for the Jets, and he couldn't wear number 12 because of Joe Namath, player number 12 for the Jets, arguably the most famous quarterback in history. Now, that Super Bowl was in 1969, and it is 69 days later to the date 11/19, which hints at 9/11, and the predicted day that Barack Obama, the Antichrist, I should say the GOAT Antichrist, will become the 51st vice president. The thing is, Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash on October 17th in St. Louis. And by the way, the first Patriots Super Bowl win was against the St. Louis Rams. And she will be replaced by Michelle Obama, and then Joe Biden will step down because he's losing his mind, and God designed it that way. And I knew this would be the case even before Joe Biden would was elected. I knew that he would be elected and that he would eventually step down so that Barack Obama could be the president. And I knew that's why Joe Biden was as old as he is and why he is losing his mind. I knew that even before the election. And Joe Biden is going to step down and Michelle Obama will become the 47th president. And then she will step down and make Barack Obama the 48th president. But she will first appoint him the vice president on November 19th, 11/19. And that's 3 sets of 17. And this all points back to the first Super Bowl of the Patriots win, which began on the 17-yard line with a score 17-17, which is 3 17s, which add up to 51. That's another confirmation that what we are looking at here with this 69 days connection is the 51st vice president. And again, the 69 days because of 1969. And that's what I'm saying. It all points back to the Super Bowl III in 1969. But also, 69 days is 1,656 hours. And that is the number of years between Adam and the flood in the Bible, which makes this judgment symbolism, because the flood is judgment symbolism. And don't get me wrong, I do not believe in a young earth. I think the argument for that is absurd. The earth is not 6,000 years old. And these are numbers that God has provided for us in the Bible, though. That's for sure. All right. So now, the thing is, as I also explained, let's see. The game when it went into overtime, and the score when it went into overtime in this dramatic game after Aaron Rodgers came out in the first drive, it was 16-16. And God uses the number 16 to hint at 4 times 4 and the 44th president. But also, Super Bowl 53 is what this is pointing at, as I've been explaining, and 53 is the 16th prime number. So this is another confirmation that this is pointing to Super Bowl 53, which points to Joe Namath. So it's all part of the same story, right? That's why the dramatic game was tied up just before, and actually it was tied. It was again. The Bills did what Brady did. It was a last-minute drive before the end of regulation time that ended in a field goal, but this time it was to tie the game. But it was somewhat of a parallel. Anyway, it tied the game at 16-16, which hints at 4 times 4, the 44th president. And the game was won with a walk-off punt return. The Jets, who had been struggling offensively with their replacement quarterback, won the game without the quarterback in the overtime when player number 82 scored the touchdown to win the game on a punt return. In other words, the Bills got the ball first, but the Jets shut them down, and then they punted the ball. And in overtime, the first team to score a touchdown wins. And so the Jets ran back the ball in for a touchdown. It was a really dramatic way to end the game. And the reason for that is because it was player number 82. And why 82? Because in the Bible, the 82nd word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance is the word to fly or flight. And it was the 2 flights on 9/11 that flew into the Twin Towers. And the purpose of it was to point to Deuteronomy chapter 28, which I explained and is the case because John Winthrop, before they disembarked the 11 ships in the flotilla, when they arrived, John Winthrop delivered his famous City on a Shining Hill speech, which was derived from Deuteronomy chapter 28, which was when Moses spoke to the Israelites about the promises and curses after they enter the promised land. Well, Deuteronomy chapter 28 hints at 82. It's a reverse. And punt returner can't be number 28 because of the position. So God pointed it to this through number 82. But at the same time, he got 2 birds with 1 stone. No pun intended. Well, kind of pun intended. So, and anyway, 82 also hints at flight. And this is all about the flights on 9/11. The jets. This is why player number 82 is for the Jets. The 2 jets that were flights that crashed into the two towers. All right. And again, it's all for the purpose of pointing to Deuteronomy chapter 28. The 11 ships flotilla hints at Flight 11. In other words, Flight 11 hints at John Winthrop and his speech that is derived from Deuteronomy chapter 28. In other words, God's Gentile nation, America, is a parallel with ancient Israel. God blessed America just like God blessed ancient Israel. America was God's nation. And if you read, I highly recommend reading Deuteronomy chapter 28 with America in mind, and you will see it is beyond a doubt that what is being spoken of in that chapter is America. Don't get me wrong, obviously it's about Israel as well. But you can see clearly this is America that God is talking about in Deuteronomy chapter 28. And anyway, that's why this game ended dramatically, symbolically, with this punt return by player 82, which hinted at Deuteronomy chapter 28. All right, so we're making progress here. Now, Josh Allen was the Bills quarterback that threw the interceptions. And Josh hints at Joshua, who led the Israelites around the walls of Jericho before they collapsed in God's judgment. Joshua died at the age of 110, and that's why the Twin Towers were 110 stories high when they collapsed, as in Joshua and the collapse of the walls of Jericho. And why, by the way, that the Twin Towers collapse engendered a small earthquake and cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, as in the walls of security of Jericho that collapsed. And that's because God pointed to George Washington, who after his first inauguration as president in Federal Hall, marched, as in the Hebrews that marched around Jericho's walls. Washington then marched down Wall Street and into Trinity Chapel, where he consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings. Trinity Chapel was the only building at Ground Zero that survived the falling debris, and it did so without even a broken window. Because through the 9/11 events, God was pointing to Trinity Chapel and George Washington's consecration to the nation to God. In other words, it was a warning. Pay attention to what Washington said. It is time to repent and turn back to God, or else this judgment warning will turn into something more, which is the predicted date, and a symbolic follow-up to that will be the dirty bombs that will explode, and I predict there'll be two of them, just like there were two explosions on 9/11 when the two planes crashed the towers. And it's predicted to be on September 25th, 2022. Now, let me see. Let's go there, I think. That's 14 days after this 9/11 Monday Night Football game. So what's the confirmation of the 14 days in the football game? Well, the big story is about Zach Wilson, who came in to replace Aaron Rodgers. The big story is how Zach Wilson isn't a very good quarterback, and what in the world are the Jets going to do now? And it just came to me. Zach Wilson is famous for being selected second overall in his draft, and that's a contrast. That's for the purpose of pointing to Tom Brady, who was selected second last in the draft. That's astounding. Because again, this big story is about Zach Wilson coming into the game. And what are the Jets going to do now? Because the Jets finally had a chance to go to the Super Bowl with a competent quarterback. And the big disappointment about Zach Wilson is that there were high hopes for him. He was selected second overall. And that's because Tom Brady, someone who there was no high hopes for, ended up becoming the greatest of all time, was selected second last in his draft. I bet you if you looked into it, there's more connections. I bet you the year of Wilson's draft connects with the year of Brady's draft or something to that effect. I wouldn't be surprised. But anyway, When Zach Wilson came into this game, which is all about Zach Wilson coming into the game, he completed 14 passes out of 21 pass attempts. 21 is 3 sets of 7, as in the walls of security collapsing after 3 sets of 7, as I explained. And 14 is a confirmation of adding 14 days to 9/11 to get the day of the follow-up judgment that was warned of on 9/11 in 2001, when it is predicted that the dirty bombs will explode in Manhattan and there will be a mass evacuation from Manhattan Island. Now, the thing is, too, the first touchdown scored in this game on 9/11-2023 was scored by player number 14 for the Bills. So we have another 14 there. Also, by the way, 14 is relevant in context of 9/11 because, and this is very big, after 9/11, 14 cows were donated to America by a Maasai tribe in the Kenyan savannah. The Maasai, the primitive Maasai tribe in the savannah, thought it would be a good idea to help America out after hearing the news to donate 14 of their cows, which is a big deal for them. It represents a lot of wealth for them. Anyway, that was a big news story, a huge news story at the time, international news story. People liked that story, that feel-good story. But the reason why it was 14 cows is because in the Bible, the king of Egypt's dream was of 14 cows, the dream that Joseph interpreted. And that dream of the 14 cows, the story of it and the interpretation is symbolism for the end times period. And the Antichrist is symbolized by the king of Egypt in the Bible. And the Antichrist was born in the Kenyan savannah. That's exactly why the 14 cows were donated by the Maasai tribe in the Kenyan savannah. If you don't know that Barack Obama was born in the Kenyan savannah, it's because you have been brainwashed, but willingly so. Willingly so. Because you favored your political tribe, your tribalism, over truth. That's the truth. You weren't interested in the truth. You were more interested in being a part of the blue team. Because the evidence is overwhelming and it's easily found if you were interested in truth. And Trump, God's trumpet, first rose to political status by calling out, trumpeting how Barack Obama was not born in the U.S. and was an unconstitutional president. Furthermore, he will become the president again in an unconstitutional way, which is why he was president from 2009 until 2017, because the date 9/17 is Constitution Day. But anyway, that's why the 14 here, and that's why this game is 14 days, and we have confirmations of it. The 14 passes by Zach Wilson, and also the first touchdown of the game, 14. But that's relevant because the date of this game is 9/11, and the 14 cows that were donated to America after 9/11. And they symbolize the end times, and the end times, a symbolic beginning of it will be on September 25th, when the predicted dirty bombs will explode in Manhattan. We are already well inside the 7 years. Anyone that knows some things about Bible prophecy, the prediction in this video will prove it. It's the purpose of the prediction from God. The 7 years in Daniel chapter 9 is only symbolic. It took me a while to figure it out. I understand why you'd be shocked to hear that, but it is the truth. The Lord is returning, the second coming, and the day is knowable. Matthew 24:36, no one knows the day, is misinterpreted and is also a mistranslation and contradicts many other passages in the Bible. It'll be on the Day of Atonement in 2024, and the prediction being made in this video is from God, and the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove this, that the second coming is in October of 2024. Case closed. It is a fact. This is the overwhelming evidence from God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And these predictions will prove that this is God's true big picture of signs. Now, 14 completed passes out of 21 is a percentage, and that's how this statistic is typically spoken of in football in terms of the percentage of completed passes. And this makes the completed pass percentage in this game 66.66%. And that's because this game is also 36 days before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will lead to Barack Obama becoming the 51st vice president, and then the 48th president. 36 days is also God uses the number 36 in his signs because it is 666 symbolism, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. So 36 days from the 66.66 percentage completed passes is because 36 is 6 times 6, but also 36 hints at 3 sixes, 36. And also it is 2 times 18, and 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. Now, this quarterback's performance is contrasted with the performance of Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills quarterback, that threw 3 interceptions to player number 3. And the quarterback's number is 17, which hinted at 3 sets of 17. And 17 is a prophetic number in God's signs. I won't get into it, but it is also the 7th prime number, which makes it a 3 sets of 7. So 3 interceptions by player number 3 of player number 17, which is the 7th prime number, is also a symbolic 3 sets of 7, which is, again, symbolic of judgment of America's walls of security collapsing and God's judgment. But again, 3 17s is also equal to 51, and that's why it is a confirmation of the connection to the day that the 51st president will become the 51st vice president. Now, let's see. The player that intercepted 3 times is Leonard Floyd. See, is it Leonard Floyd? So I think it is. Yeah. If I'm wrong, I apologize. And Leonard Floyd is the name of the player that ran the ball back in to win the game. But I'm pretty sure it's the player that intercepted 3 times. But either way, in gematria, in simple English gematria, the name Leonard Floyd, which is a big part of the game, is equal to 131. Now, if you don't know what gematria is, Hebrew, Roman, and Greek letters are also numbers, and words and names can be converted into numeric values. And if we do this with English, the name Leonard Floyd, if we use the same thing with the letter A is equal to 1, B is equal to 2, C is 3, etc., it adds up to 131, and that's because the 131st word in Strong's Greek New Testament concordance is the word blood disease, which is what one gets after taking the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing. And this is the 22nd anniversary of 9/11. And the number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. That's why it's relevant that Leonard Floyd's name equals 131. Now, 22, because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist in Ezekiel chapter 9 would have been a Tav mark, and in ancient Hebrew, the Tav letter was an X, was the last letter, and the X symbolizes chromosomes, but it's the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Tav letter, and is the 22nd letter in the alphabet. Now, the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, which is the 22nd out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And that's just scratching the surface for why 22 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. But also, the mark of the Antichrist changes one's chromosomes and causes blood disease. And a chromosome is an X, which is why the Tav mark would have symbolized it as well. Now, a chromosome is made up of 2 arms. And a pair of chromosomes is what makes the X. So you have 2 and 2. 2 arms and 2 arms of 2 chromosomes, which gives us 22. Now, the small arm of a chromosome is called the petite, because petite in French, the small arm. And that's why Philippe Petit from France walked across the Twin Towers in his tightrope walk exactly 70 weeks after they officially opened. He snuck up onto the towers and walked across them, and then was arrested by the police, and then became a hero. But it was exactly 70 weeks because the most central prophecy in the Bible is the 70 weeks prophecy, which regards the timing of the arrival of the Messiah and the second coming, and also the period of the end times, the 70th week of the 70 weeks, the period of the Antichrist, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which changes one's chromosomes and gives one's blood disease. And that's why petite, the small arm of the chromosome, is named petite. And the chromosomes have a nomenclature, and it goes up to P22.3. That's how it's there. The segments of the chromosomes are numbered. 22.3, which hints at 223, which hints at 2023, the year that the Antichrist will become the Antichrist. But also 223 is the 48th prime number, and it is the 48th president that will become the president in 2023, the Antichrist, that will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. And Philip Petit, when he walks across a tightrope with his balancing pole, is symbolic of a cross with a man at the middle, symbolic of Christ's sacrifice on the cross. And that was the symbolic beginning of the Twin Towers. And when they collapsed, the 20-foot steel beam cross stood upright. The perfectly proportioned steel beam cross, which is now in the 9/11 museum, the famous cross, was at the end of the life of the Twin Towers. Another cross, another prophetic cross. And by the way, that cross in the debris field was part of how I came to faith. So, let's see. I might have explained it all now. The one touchdown that Zach Wilson threw was to player number 17, and it was a 3-yard touchdown, which is another 3 17s, which hints at 51 and the 51st vice president 69 days later, because again, this game points back to the Jets quarterback in 1969. But Zach Wilson, the Jets quarterback, threw a 3-yard touchdown to player 17, the only touchdown that he threw. But not only that, this player bobbled the ball 3 times. It's one of the most spectacular catches you'll ever see if you want to look it up. He, while falling to the ground with his right hand, batted the ball into the air, was all he could do. And then, so the ball ended up going the other direction, and then he held out his arm again to try to get it again, which bounced the ball back into the air again towards him, and then he pulled it in. So he bobbled it 3 times. Player 17, most spectacular catch, bobbled the ball 3 times, which is another 3 sets of 17, which equals 51. Here's another one. So the field goal that sent the game into overtime, the dramatic drive that tied the game up 16-16, which is at 4 times 4 on the 44th president. Well, it was a 50-yard field goal, and 50 symbolizes the church, and the Antichrist will persecute the church, which is the purpose of the end times as a test of faith for the church, quote unquote Christians. And it was with 2 seconds left in the game, but the ball hit the upright, which hints at the towers that, because the uprights of the field goal posts in a football game are symbolic of the 2 towers. And God has demonstrated that in other signs. So if you know football, the uprights are these really high poles that are parallel to each other. There's 2 of them. So they symbolize the 2 twin towers, right? And this game got put into overtime because the ball hit the upright. It was in this 50-yard field goal attempt. And it was player number 2 that kicked the ball, and it hit the upright with 2 seconds left in the game. That's astounding, because that hints at 22, and this was on the 22nd anniversary of when 2 planes struck the 2 towers on 9/11. That's why this ball hit the upright by player number 2 with 2 seconds left in the game. That's astounding. And furthermore, the 22nd anniversary is a hint at the, I forgot to mention, the mark of the Antichrist, or maybe I did mention it. And that's why Leonard Floyd adds up to 131. But it's also hinting at the 2 towers that struck the 2 planes that struck the 2 towers on 9/11. That's a 2-2 in itself. So the 22nd anniversary of 9/11 actually points back to the 2 planes that struck the 2 towers, a 2 and 2. One last thing, I think, Josh Allen, the player number 17 quarterback for the Bills, the Buffalo Bills, God is using buffalo signs to hint at the buffalo bison in Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming and its predicted eruption on February 24th, 2024. And Josh Allen played for Wyoming University. And Wyoming is in the 44th state to join the Union. The Yellowstone caldera is in the 44th state, and the Yellowstone caldera is on the 44th latitudinal line. And that's why this game with Josh Allen was tied 16-16 to go into overtime. That hints at 4 times 4 and the 44th state and Yellowstone caldera on the 44th latitudinal line. That's why it's astounding that Josh Allen was in this game, because he played for Wyoming, the 44th state. And furthermore, God pairs 17 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections. And that's how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and conditions works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way in which you provide second witnesses is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 17 and 44. And I won't say any, I'll just leave it at that. So the 44th president will be defeated by the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ on the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month, which is what 17 hints at. Furthermore, in Bible prophecy, the Antichrist is used a metaphor of a beast to describe it. And this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns, which is another 17 hint. And the 44th president is the Antichrist, the second of 2 Antichrists. The first Antichrist is Pope Francis. All right. Who was elected Pope on the date 3/13, which is why the lowest barometric pressure with the bomb cyclone on the date 3/13, right after the record lowest scoring Super Bowl, at the beginning of which the Pope Francis delivered a word on the screen to the people in the stadium. So I think that's it now. Oh, Aaron Rodgers, he wore jersey number 8 because it's 4 + 4, and that also hints at the 44th president, Antichrist. That's why, again, the game was tied at 16-16 to go into overtime. And again, this Aaron Rodgers is all about the GOAT, Tom Brady, and the GOAT, Antichrist, is the 44th president. That's why Aaron Rodgers in this game wore jersey number 8. Very briefly. All right, I think I said it all now. All right, I apologize. I made a mistake. Leonard Floyd is the player that hit Aaron Rodgers, which makes it more appropriate, actually. He's the guy that hit Aaron Rodgers. He's the guy whose name adds up to 131 on the 22nd anniversary of 9/11. And this is, again, the big sign is the pointing back to the hit of the planes on 9/11. And I forgot to mention that the 2 towers are symbolic of the 2 arms of the of chromosomes. So that's why the small arm is the petite, and why he walked across the Twin Towers. I didn't finish that. I just realized that's why Philip Pettit is a confirmation, because he walked across the Twin Towers exactly 70 weeks after they opened, which can only be from God, because furthermore, he engenders a cross, and that's Christ, and the 70 weeks prophecy is all about Christ. But his name is Petite, and that's because of the petite arm of the chromosomes, which is what the two towers hint at, the two arms of a chromosome. And that's why they were replaced with the one world tower that looks like a giant thing that is used to administer the thing. If you look at that one world tower, it looks like a thing. It looks like a thing that's used to put the thing in. And that's why. And that's why the 22nd anniversary is so prophetic, because it hints at the mark of the Antichrist, because the number 22 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. And what does the mark of the Antichrist do? It gives blood disease, and that's why Leonard Floyd hit Aaron Rodgers. Sorry, this is a big, important thing. Glad I caught this at the end, though, anyway. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com.